Hey guys, welcome to this edition of Cover One Buffalo. This is a pregame show for the preseason. I got the OG with me tonight, Erik Turner. What is happening, my man?
What's going on, Aaron? You ready for another Friday night football game or what?
Dude, I kind of like this weekday evening and the summer games. I don't like Thursday night football during the year, but I kind of like this right now, where I'm not, I'm not taking a whole day to watch football. I'm just going to watch my game on a Friday night. I'm into it.
No, I like it. I personally like it a lot because you get the game out of the way, and then it gives us a little more time to break it down and form our opinions this weekend. So you have everything ready by Monday when everyone's ready to gobble up all the information on the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of to take something from you, is it's going to be nice to wake up Saturday morning, grab my coffee, and rewatch this game, on Game Pass, and take my time Saturday morning getting to watch the game. Where on the weekdays, as a stay-at-home dad, I don't have a lot of time sometimes in the morning to really sit and watch something like that. So that's going to be nice too, to just be able to kind of digest the whole weekend and take a look at it. Like you said, all the people that contribute to Bill's sites, we'll be able to get a ton of content out. So Bills fans will be happy Monday morning when all that content gets dropped on them. So this game, man, we got the Browns. This one's an interesting matchup for a number of reasons. Obviously, however he's saying his name now, Tyrod Taylor is going to be playing against the Bills. I'm sure he wants to make that defense look bad and make, all of his doubters here in Buffalo look bad. But also, I'm super interested, and I know you are because you spent a lot of time watching these guys in the offseason here during the draft season. See Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, I got to watch Baker's first game, and if you guys went over to the YouTube channel, you probably saw it. It's like a 10 to 12 minute breakdown, but I thought he played really well. I thought that he showed off his command of the offense. I thought he had really good presence in the pocket, which is something that we liked with him coming out of college. And I do like it. I've always liked his accuracy and placement, and he showed he threw a couple balls that were just money. I mean, the two touchdowns specifically, the one where he dropped it in the back of the end zone to Njoku late in the play, and then that quick slant to Antonio Callaway may seem easy, but he had to reload and reset, and he still was able to place it perfectly so that Callaway could catch it in stride and run for the touchdown. So I'm excited to watch him. Obviously, I'm excited to watch the Bills rookie as well. So it should be a fun matchup. You throw Tyrod in there, spice that in there, and just it's gonna be fun to watch.
Yeah, and obviously the Browns are doing the Hard Knocks thing this year too, so that adds a little extra element for those that follow Hard Knocks. It's always fun to watch that team in the preseason games, and then the next week you get to kind of see that game unfold again on Hard Knocks. So it'll be cool. The Bills will be on Hard Knocks next week, which will be nice. But yeah, like you said, Allen, Mayfield, there's a lot of talk that maybe Dorsey, if he didn't get Mayfield with that number one pick, was going to take Allen at some point, in the draft, trade down or whatever it was. So, it'd be kind of interesting if Allen comes out and really lights it up. And but I think I agree with you after watching Mayfield. The guy's going to be a legit player. And when your team plays against him, it's going to be fun to watch because he's going to make plays. The way he plays, man, is just a pretty exciting form of quarterbacking, and I bet we'll see a few exciting plays this evening.
Yeah, it's kind of like Allen, he has those splash plays, but I think Mayfield, he lives in the pocket a little more than Allen. I think Allen early on in his career is going to be more of a extend the play type guy, but Mayfield can do that, extend the play from within the pocket right now, and that's what's so fun to watch with him. But you know what? They're both gamers, man. That's what's awesome about this draft class is, each guy has their strengths and weaknesses, but they are just gamers. They can make plays. They can help their team. And just finding that consistency is really going to be the key for all of these young quarterbacks from this draft class.
Yeah, and I don't know if I haven't been on Twitter because I've been trying to get this up and running, obviously, and talking to the guys over in the Slack channel, which, by the way, if you aren't a premium member, it's totally worth it just to get in that Slack channel. We were talking pretty much all day, discussing different things. So get over to cover1.net and check out our premium memberships, and I'll talk about it a little bit more before we sign off here. But have you seen who's starting tonight for the Bills?
I think someone in the chat room said AJ starting tonight.
Is it definite? Okay. So what are your thoughts on that? Like that was kind of a hot topic right now in the Slack channel of, if AJ starts, does Allen get the twos, and does that bump Peterman to the threes? Is that a slap in the face to Peterman? My opinion was that this is so close that none of this really matters. It's such a close rotation that anybody can kind of fall anywhere. What are your thoughts on McCarron if he does get the start?
I think it's fair. I think what's even more important is if he's getting the start, does that mean Allen's getting it next week? I think that's the bigger story here.
And that's the big one, right?
Yeah, that's how it's the the pieces are falling into place, and usually that's telling who starts that third game, because that's like McDermott said during the week, whoever starts that game, they want to get that person usually to settle in for the rest of the year leading into the season and kind of get that rhythm going with the starters. So I think that's pretty telling that AJ's starting. Am I surprised? No, I just think I do think that the staff is honestly giving everyone a fair shot. I think it comes down to, Aaron, like you said, who's going to be the guy to possibly give the Bills the best chance to win. I think by the time next week's over, I think they'll have that answer, and we'll hopefully have that answer, and we can roll with that guy going into the first week of the season.
Yeah, I mean, if everybody plays like they played last week, I think that is nothing but a benefit. So I would be totally fine if this competition stays close and that they have a really hard decision to make next week. But I agree with you. I think it's fair. And I think it's very interesting to watch if Allen performs well tonight, or even performs really the same as he did. Does that give the Bills enough to say, hey, let's give this guy, a shot with the Kelvin Benjamins? Because I did think Nate Peterman played well. I talked about it on the pod this week. Thought he played very well, but I do think it would be fair for all these other guys to get a shot with the ones. As far as the line, guys like Kelvin Benjamin, Charles Clay, I think there's a huge difference and a big drop off from Kelvin Benjamin to every other receiver AJ McCarron and Josh Allen played with. Do you think that that's a fair assessment, that maybe Nate Peterman's performance should be graded on a curve and not the stats?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to preseason, you shouldn't be really looking at the stats anyways, because again, there are just so many variables in the game of football. But then you throw in preseason when you're having guys rotate in and out and trying to, work your offense and practice concepts and work different combinations. There's just so many more variables in preseason. So trying to isolate those stats and gauge which guy did better is it's unfair. So I do think you have to. I think film is even more important in preseason. And I think coaches will tell you that same thing too. So I think Peterman had played well, but I think that this staff, as I mentioned in all of those videos on the breakdowns, I think that Dable did a really good job of calling plays that fit those guys' strengths. And I think with Peterman, it was hit the top of the drop, get rid of the ball. It was a quick passing game, and there weren't a lot of passes over the middle, and there weren't a lot of passes to the far sideline from the far hash. So there's a lot of things that I want to see from all three different quarterbacks. AJ McCarron was a guy that worked the middle of the field pretty well last week. Well, I'd like to see him, push the ball down the field a little more, have him challenge some of those balls outside the numbers. And then Josh Allen, I want to see from him, I want to see throws over the middle and that short area, because he only had a couple of them last week. And with his arm velocity and arm strength, I want to see him with those touch passes underneath, and whether he can hit guys in stride if they're crossing from left to right on a crossing route. I want to see him throw it a catchable ball, so the guy doesn't have to worry and be so focused in on the ball because he's throwing it so hard. We have to be able to catch it with his soft hands and then run. So I think each quarterback had a good week last week. I do want to see Dable challenge them a little bit more, and it's going to be a challenge because guess what? They're working with different guys now this week, so that's part of that challenge.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you. Here in the chat, we got looks like Myth. What was his name here? Sorry, Myth3Fly. This is a question for you, Erik, because I know you were a little bit vocal, or not vocal, but you did give your opinion online about Corey Coleman and the Hard Knocks scene and his asking for a trade. And he's asking, is Corey Coleman a diva and does it matter? And then I want you to follow that up with, what do we need to see from Corey Coleman tonight in his first debut with the Bills? Fans haven't seen this guy yet. So that kind of two-parter.
Yeah, I mean, is he a diva? He comes off that way. I think that he felt entitled as a first-round draft pick and a guy that, when he was healthy, was making some plays. I think he felt entitled, and he had no reason to. You got to think about, yes, Hugh has been there, but Haley hasn't, and Haley comes from a lot of winning organizations. He knows what it takes to win, and don't be surprised if that guy Haley is not the head coach in a few weeks, because I just think that Corey came off as entitled. And second of all, I don't like the way he addressed his coaching staff. I don't like the way he came into the office, frustrated or not. Would Corey Coleman do that to a Bill Belichick? would he do that to a Mike Tomlin? I don't think so. I think that it also shows that Hugh doesn't have the respect of all of his players, but what it comes down to is being a pro. And I don't think Corey handled that situation of being bumped to the twos well. And for me, I would have just liked him to keep his head down and, earn that spot back, because again, they could just be shuffling him around. It could be just sending him a point, sending a message to him. So I just didn't like the way he handled it. And I'm pretty sure that McDermott and Bean, when they brought Coleman in, that was one of the first things they had to talk with him about, because you know what? He's not entitled to anything with the Bills. I mean, they could literally just cut him in a couple weeks and really not really, be bat an eye, because they didn't give up that much to get him.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, they started him on the bottom. I think they sent a clear message, just like they have to everybody. Zay Jones got that same message a couple of weeks ago. You got to earn your way back when you get in the doghouse with this team. So, and speaking of Zay, we had a question here: who has more to prove, Coleman or Zay Jones? What are your thoughts there?
I think that it has to be Zay, because Zay is their guy. Zay is a guy they drafted and they believed in, and they've stuck by him through, some pretty hard times on the field, but probably even worse times off the field. So a young kid trying to, get his career back on track and his life back on track. So I think they owe a little more to Zay, and I think they want him to develop into the guy that they thought they had when they drafted him. So I think he's got more to prove than Corey Coleman, just because, again, they don't really have ties to Corey Coleman besides trading a 7th-round pick for the future 7th-round pick.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, because when people start talking about trading Zay, I had to remind them, like, Bills traded up to get this guy, so they're not going to get nearly back what they gave up to get him. Where Corey Coleman, like you said, this guy doesn't work out in the next 3 weeks. Sorry, buddy. Like, that 2020 7th-round pick gone. Who cares? Like, yeah, that's all we gave up. So it's not a big deal. Where Zay, you went traded up to get him. You really invested a lot in this kid. Brandon Beans talked about those draft assets being some of the most important assets that a team holds. So they're definitely all in on Zay to improve. But I think at the same time, when you talk about that, I think Zay, even more so, I know Coleman's out to prove his doubters wrong, but Zay clearly suffered a lot more backlash. That one, maybe the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen for a player to have to go through. And I'm sure dealing with the questions already this summer has, fueled that fire. But and all indications are in practice that he's coming out with a new edge to him. He's doing things that maybe we didn't see before from him. People are saying he looks fast, which he's never really been accused of that. So he might come out and really shock some people. Now, so those guys, Coleman, Zay Jones, Zay's kind of worked his way up this depth chart over the last week since he got out of that no contact jersey. Coleman kind of also working his way back in. Where do you expect those guys tonight? Are we going to see them with the ones? Are they with the twos? They're going to kind of be 2s and 3s. Where are you expecting to see those guys?
I expect Coleman to probably work with the 2s, and it's going to be a limited route tree, a limited play selection for him. So I think it was set up. And if you read Matt Fairburn's article this week, I pointed out that if both have been working with the 2s, you got to expect a couple deep shots, and whether they connect or not, it's going to affect that defense. They have to play deep. They have to, respect that deep game. And so that's what Josh Allen brings. He's going to lift the top off of a defense. He's going to make them respect that arm, because it doesn't matter how late the play is. If inside the structure of the play, outside the structure of the play, guess what? Everyone needs to stay alive in the play, because he could at any moment launch the ball 70, 80 yards and connect. So that's just something that he brings that the others aren't. And so that's going to obviously affect the passing game, but it's going to even affect the running game even more. When if he gets a chance with the ones, when you have the Shady McCoys and the Chris Ivory's, guys that can run the ball. I think he just brings a different element. So I do think Zay will probably work with the ones from all accounts, but I think seeing him sprinkled in with both quarterbacks in the first and second string would be kind of nice to see, because I haven't personally seen it this far, in camp so far. So we'll see.
Yeah, no doubt. And my eyes lit up when you were talking about that, because I've obviously in the Slack channel and all those things, I've been really pounding that I think Josh Allen gives them the best chance to win. And that point you just made is, again, another point that proves it. Even if Allen isn't necessarily the most NFL ready in the room, just his traits alone, I think, open up so much more. His running ability, like we've talked about, that big play ability. But then, like you said, all week long after that preseason game, a lot of the analysts were just talking about how he missed the deep ball balls and that his accuracy was bad on those deep balls. But the ability to take those shots, and that defenses, whether he's missing them or not, defenses have to defend that. Like you said, opens things up for a guy like LaShawn McCoy, where Nathan Peterman, in the style that he played, he did play excellent. I'm not taking anything away from the guy. But those short passing games, that allows defenses to creep up. They're not scared that, he did get that one big touchdown, but Nathan Peterman's not going to kill you for 16 games with the deep ball. He's going to kill you with 1,000 paper cuts, right? Like that's what he's going to do. So that allows defenses to really crowd the box.
Yeah, you're right. And you saw, because I even pointed a couple of those throws out that he did complete to Benjamin. You saw the defense start to squat on him. And you saw even the one play to Benjamin where Shaq Thompson probably makes a play on that ball if the placement isn't better. So, obviously they all have different traits. And I think the offense is going to be a little different depending on which one's in there. But here's a great question I thought Tyler brought up, because I had never seen this before. And it has to do with AJ McCarron playing primarily with Russell Bodine, and then Groy playing with Peterman. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. I don't know about you, Aaron, but I do think it's very telling because, I talked about this with Eric Wood, how much of an adjustment it's going to be with losing, him in incognito, but also the relationship between the center and the quarterback, because we're obviously going to have a new starting quarterback this year. And having those two positions replaced in one season is a lot to take in, and it changes the dynamic of an offense. So I'm not surprised that they are keeping that pairing of McCarron with Bodine, because they obviously have some type of rapport together, and they maybe see the field in the same exact way. Maybe there's certain cadence or rhythm to how they play together versus Peterman and Groy. I think that's really interesting, and I've never seen that before. I don't know about you, Aaron.
No, I hadn't seen it before. I remember talking about it early in the preseason in the Slack channel, though, because Peterman obviously ran with Groy in practices and things like that all last year. So there's definitely a built-up rapport there, I'm assuming, over years of practice or the last year of practice. And then, AJ McCarron and Bodine play together. And so there's some type of rapport there. So, I mean, while I haven't seen it, it does make sense where you don't have a guy that solidified the starting job. Keep the quarterbacks comfortable. I think what is also telling is the coaches right now have no idea who's going to be the starting center, and it might be dependent on who wins this quarterback job.
And, the other thing now that just, kind of popped in my head, I posted a play earlier on Twitter where Allen, slid the protection. And when he was with the third stringers last week, I mean, that's kind of good, too. You think about it, he doesn't really have the rapport with that third string center. I think it's Redmond, right? And you saw him take control of the protections. Usually, that's a center's job, especially if it's a veteran. So that's almost giving Allen a little more responsibility. It's something, again, Eric Wood talked about when he had a younger quarterback. He was more in charge than, say, when Tyrod was in there or whatnot. So I think that's another thing that's probably not talked about with Allen playing with the threes, is that he had a little more responsibility on his shoulders, because, you have a center in Redmond who's obviously not that experienced either. So, kind of gives Allen a little more responsibility. So that's another thing that I think that's not being talked about thus far in camp.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. And even in your breakdown of Allen's touchdown pass and some of the things we saw from Allen, I think he's a little bit further ahead than we thought he was as far as NFL ready and seeing defenses and reading some of the field. And I think that's a great sign. And kind of like you said, him being able to adjust at the line and as a rookie, that's a great sign. And hopefully we see more of that tonight. One question here in the chat box from Sean. I'm going to butcher his last name, Siraki. I'm sorry if I killed that. But I know this is one that you've been watching. I know it's one of your favorite positions to watch after years of knowing you now. And let us know, man. Are we worried about our linebackers?
I'm not, personally.
Okay.
First of all, okay, say for some reason the staff's not happy with Milano and Humber does play. Humber is not as bad as everyone's making him out to be. He played pretty well that first half of the season. All right. The only difference between Milano and Humber is the fact that it does limit what you can do in coverage, because he cannot cover guys man to man. But where he does help you is versus the run, because he's more disciplined than Milano. You saw Milano all last week. Any of those play action passes, guess what? He got caught too deep into the line of scrimmage. So, it's they both have different traits and abilities. But let's not act like Humber is not a serviceable player. And second of all, we only played one game. And in things up front along the D line are a lot different this year with the players that are there, and they're probably even using a little more different scheme because now they have a Star Lotulelei who can anchor and double versus occupy two guys, a center and the guard on one place. So it's going to look different. And you saw Tremaine Edmonds struggle a little bit last week too, because he's adjusting to a different defense and a lot more responsibility. So while I do think that maybe we're jumping the gun based on what people are writing during the week about Milano struggling and whatnot, I wouldn't worry too much because I think the staff obviously liked him for a reason. They drafted him for a reason. I do think they believe he can carry out a lot of what they want to do. And I think he's going to impact the coverages that they run and have been running a little more man coverage this year in camp and what they're doing on the back end. So that all ties in. And I just want to jump the gun yet. But also, if something were to happen where Milano doesn't start, I wouldn't worry. I think he'll get his legs up under him, and eventually he'll be back in there anyways.
Yeah, so 2 points I want to make to that. One, we talked about it again on the pod a little bit. I think Milano is in his second year. He's a young guy with a lot of potential. He still was a later round pick. He's going to have times where he makes mistakes, slips up, doesn't look as good as people expect him to. I think he became a fan favorite for some big plays, turnovers. He came in and played well. It's easy to like guys like that, but he's still in the learning process of becoming a pro. He came on late last year. So I'm expecting some ebbs and flows in the start of his career. Same with Tremaine Edmonds. He's learning the system. He's learning how to be a pro. So you got two guys that are super athletic. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to get aggressive and all that. With Humber, I do worry about the drop off with Humber. I worry about the athleticism. You talked about this ability to do different things, whether it's man or zone. The Bills might be better off right now playing a little bit more zone. I know they want to play more man, and they're showing those looks in preseason here. But the defensive backs, the lack of depth at defensive back, I don't think plays well into playing too much man. I don't want to see Phillip Gaines out there too much, or even Taron Johnson too much against some of these slot receivers in the NFL man to man.
No, there's no doubt about it. And I think that's where the weakness lies, is at that slot corner position. I think White and Vontae Davis can hold it down if you were to go to man. And even our safeties on the back end can match up with most tight ends and even drop down the slot if needed. But I just think that we saw in the second half of last year, we played a little more man coverage, and that was because Milano was inserted. It just doesn't tip your hand. Right. If you know what I mean, it doesn't tip your hand, because if teams, a common concept is, they'll come out in a 3-by-1 set. And guess what? How do you play the backside of that 3-by-1 set? How do you play that solo receiver and then the running back aligned to that backside of that formation? More times than not, teams will just man up, keep it simple. Well, if you have a Ramon Humber in there and he takes a bad angle versus man coverage on a running back, you're in trouble. Milano can at least make up for that with his athleticism. So it just opens up the playbook on the as far as coverage goes. But again, I wouldn't worry, guys. It's only one game, and they didn't play that many snaps anyway. And it's a work in progress. And again, he doesn't have his Preston Brown next to him, helping him what to do. And honestly, think about it, Milano, and you watch him tonight, because I saw a couple plays last week where he was almost helping Edmonds with the calls and pointing out guys and moving defensive linemen into the proper gaps and alignment. So that's something just to keep an eye on. I wouldn't worry quite yet, because both those guys are athletic, and a lot of times that athleticism is going to make up for some of their mistakes.
Yeah, and you mentioned Preston Brown, obviously next to him, and then my boy Leonard Johnson was right there near those guys too, which there's a big handoff between those linebackers and that nickel.
So big, man.
I mean, even if Leonard Johnson's not the best, most athletic guy in the world, if you have a guy that knows what he's doing right now, you have two guys that are new to this defense, new to this team, one that's already struggled in the NFL. So there's a little bit of stuff there too, but kind of one last thought here, as you were saying, they only got 1-2 drives. I think all of us as fans, and myself included, need to pump the brakes a little bit, because football, a lot of the times, is a game of rhythms and getting into your rhythm. And it takes more than 2 drives for a lot of these guys and a lot of teams. I mean, teams don't even know really a feel for the game after 2 drives, right? So we all got to kind of pump the brakes when the starters are out there for 2 drives. They wouldn't be able to sustain as good as our first string offense did for the first drive for 4 quarters, but they also wouldn't do as poorly as the defense did on that second drive, right? It's a very small sample.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Again, you mentioned it, the snap count. I mean, it's going to take time. I mean, that was their first real live action versus another team, and versus a quarterback who obviously is pretty darn good in Cam Newton. So, with a veteran offense, that has some playmakers. So, I mean, I wouldn't worry, guys. I'm with you, Aaron. Pump the brakes and give it at least 3 games, and then start worrying. But I'll tell you what, I'm not really worried at all.
No, I'm not worried. But what I am worried about is getting myself over to my couch and getting ready for this game. So I do appreciate everybody that came out to join us and do this pregame. We are going to try to do this before every game. And if you don't know, we are going to do a post-game show. So as soon as the game wraps up here this evening, come on back to the Cover One YouTube channel. While you're here, just go ahead and subscribe. Click that little notification bell so you'll know when we go live. You don't even have to leave your couch or do anything. We'll come right to you. So go over there, do that. We'll give you all the rundown of the game, everything like that. Erik, man, I appreciate you coming on tonight, and I look forward to all the breakdowns that you have over the weekend and into next week of this game. Are you going to be able to enjoy the game at all?
Yeah, I'm gonna be able to watch probably 2, maybe 3 quarters, but then I do got to work tonight, so I'll be able to catch up, like I said, this weekend and get you guys some content. I'm probably gonna do a couple of video breakdowns if I can find a pretty good angle. Obviously, with the quarterbacks, I'll probably be front and center just to kind of keep everyone on the same page and see how everyone's progressing. So be on the lookout for that this weekend, fellas.
All right, guys, thanks so much. As always, follow us on all the social medias and all that good stuff, and come check us out after the game, and we'll talk some more Bills, man. Enjoy the game, guys.